My teaching philosophy originates in a web of deep roots entangled in a mycorrhizal network of the lives and memories of my student athletes. 20 years ago, I became a coach, and on the ski trails, in the weight room, and while running mountains, I have cultivated a deep understanding of the inextricable links between physical wellness, immersion in nature, and intellectual development. Studying the roots of informal learning are the nodules of my first formal teaching experience. At 22 years old, I agreed to teach chemistry for the Upward Bound summer program, and I found myself in a classroom of low-income and first-generation students. Together, we discovered the motions of electrons and painted the classroom with the resulting pigments. The colors of paramagnetic transition metals now blur with the tears that marked the end of the summer. I had fallen deeply, recklessly in love with teaching and had begun to understand that teaching could open doors of liberation. I tried to fill every possible hour of my day with teaching. In a lecture hall of 200 general chemistry students, I learned that content cannot be poured like water into the minds of students, no matter how meticulously and diligently the professor siphons. By contrast, I saw how enthusiasm and passion flow freely between teacher and learner. Like the hydrogen bonds in water's liquid phase, this shared enthusiasm between professor and every student in the classroom is both precious in its fleetingness and intensely strong in its collectiveness. In these moments, distractions wash away and there is only learning, learning stimulated by emotion. This recognition that cognition is a product of affect began to form the fabric of my root network even before I met my great mentor, Ed Neufer, and learned of his philosophy of educating in fractal patterns. On the line at the base of a Y, Ed's fractal generator shows effective self-introspection as the root from which content grows and from which pedagogy, assessment, and development of students' cognition and metacognition branch. In 2002, tears and applause ended my time in the general chemistry lecture hall, and I left with great sadness, but with the realization that I chose my new position as the microbiology instructor because it allowed me to work with students in both the lecture and the lab. In this synergy of individualized hands-on learning, the core of my learner-centered philosophy grew. In science, truly placing students at the center of instruction is rare, for I believe that doing such means de-emphasizing content and emphasizing students' emotional connection with that content. Thus, any day in the lecture hall is not complete without connecting specific students to the day's topic. Peter loves birds, so today in biochemistry, as we talk about esters, we will focus on the variation of these molecules in the wings of neotropical passerines and the role that they play in waterproofing. Each magical moment in which students are placed at the center of instruction reflects many hours of study spent learning every student's name, interests, hobbies, hopes, and dreams, and gracefully interweaving them into the curriculum every single day. Learner-centered pedagogy means finding ways to enable students to connect personally with current and applicable events. In microbiology, I accomplished this through a semester-long research project in which student teams identify a current topic, propose a hypothesis, dive into the literature, and present their findings as a poster. On each day of class, student teams engage in active team-based learning. A learning assistant guides their problem-solving, drawing, literature reading, modeling. Before coming to class, student teams prepare by watching vodcasts, reading literature passages, and collecting building materials. These preparatory activities are together dubbed the pre-party. I also reach individual learners through design of my own lab manual and supportive virtual resources. The Virtual Edge provides online dry labs that complement the wet labs. It allows students to exercise or to experience lab procedures ahead of time and to come to lab fully prepared. Moreover, Virtual Edge allows students with severe chemical sensitivities, allergies, or compromised immune function to experience the microbiology lab. The Virtual Edge has now blossomed into an international resource. It provides access for anyone to microbiology. On January 15th, 2018, over 500,000 people from 216 countries had watched more than 1 million minutes on the Virtual Edge YouTube channel. While my teaching of entry-level gateway courses serves to create a stronger learner-centered core for my philosophical tree, good teaching cannot continue in the absence of one's own learning. Graduate coursework in exercise physiology, sociology, instructional design, instructional technology, and adult education have intertwined and wrapped like rings around the trunk of my tree. Humanism gave support to my learner-centered pedagogy, and through both experience and the reading of Carl Rogers' work, I came to understand my role to be that of a facilitator, a role model. I became attentive to Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I strive to both facilitate students in their search for self-actualization and to realize and attend to the many barriers that prevent their progression. Towards these ends, I have initiated the Sexy Mind campaign, in which I fight the overarching view that grades are the most important product of learning, and challenge the attitude that it's not cool or nerdy to be intelligent. Coursework in adult education evolved my andragogy and introduced me to Paulo Freire's social emancipatory philosophy. I began to use problem-posing education to guide student and instructor co-investigation into sociocultural situations related to biochemistry. Perhaps the best example of this is in a course component called the DA Club. Inspired by the Harry Potter books, the DA Club is a student group that has deep critical learning as its mission. Questions center on topics ranging from peptide toxins of venomous snakes to the ethical implications and biochemical impacts of the overuse of methylphenidate, Ritalin, as a scholastic performance enhancer. The major goal of the group is for students to teach and learn from one another. Students are assessed both individually and as a group using a critical thought rubric with areas dedicated to Bloom's taxonomy, comprehension, application synthesis, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Groups, in addition to being judged in quality of writing, source assessment, and synthesis, are asked to consider author standpoint, socio-situatedness, bias, and also funding agencies. I found both great liberation and great oppression in my continued formal education. A transformational learning experience in feminist methodology allowed me to deconstruct the scientific method and for the first time see how positivism maintains the oppression of marginalized learners. On this steady pillar, I began to employ qualitative research methodologies, particularly narrative research, to study the experience of marginalized students in the sciences. I proposed a doctoral dissertation that utilized the inclusive spaces of virtual world to explore the experiences of LGBTQ+S students who had left the sciences. Shortly after presenting this proposal, my committee chair emailed with the simple yet devastating request that I replace him. In an attempt to do so, I found myself in a stark, white room with a heavy, dark wood desk. Speaking my desire to use qualitative narrative research to collect the stories of LGBTQ+S people's experiences in the sciences. He inked my soul onto the tablet before him, and on his tablet, my life's philosophical underpinnings looked more naked than they felt inside. Why, he asked, would you want to use narrative research? He looked down at the tablet of my life and said, I have no interest in, and he circled LGBTQ. The words must have been too hard for him to say. And as though in explanation for the loss of my original committee chair, he said that no one wanted to chair a committee with so many strong women. If growth through liberating education forms the shoots of my philosophical tree, then damage from oppression is the beautiful, thick bark weathered by the Wyoming wind. The scars from the deepest of cuts provide the sinuous supportive fabric that holds the most gnarled, strongest branch of my philosophical tree. The Venus life network of this inclusive pedagogy branch is born of the integration of feminism and queer theory as it mixes with learner-centered instructional design models. In 2012, this merger awoke me at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I wrote a vision statement for the development of the microbiology capstone course. Guided by Merrill's first principle of instruction, I adapted this instructional design model to incorporate service learning. Students partner with local farms, such as Acres Student Farm, community gardens, local businesses, such as Bright Agritech, the Downtown Clinic, and the Wyoming Medication Donation Program, in order to conceptualize, propose, perform, and present a study addressing a problem being experienced by these community partners. Students write an NSF-style grant proposal. They formulate hypotheses, design experiments to test these hypotheses, and spend the center phase of instruction doing benchtop science. They learn and practice lab notebook etiquette, and they record their research in a digital and photo documentary that is communicated with the stakeholders. In the final weeks of the semester, students prepare and present a poster that is assessed by subject matter experts and community partners. The capstone course has enabled the assessment of student skills and advanced the microbiology program to a top-tier program when rated by the University Assessment Committee. A manuscript reporting on this process will appear in Purdue's Interdisciplinary Journal of Problem-Based Learning this spring. But no assessment data, no matter how rich, will ever tell the full story of capstone. Every day we come together to solve problems. We struggle together, fail together, and gain a growth mindset together. Our conversations are rich and authentic as we speak introspectively about the future, about how capstone fits into the broader framework of social and environmental justice, and what we can do to make positive changes in the world. While the story of microbiology capstone course has a happy ending, the journey was one fraught with struggle. Insurmountable evidence exists to support the pedagogical merit of courses based in problem solving. Moreover, these courses based in problems that are tangible, local, and have meaningful community impact are more inclusive. However, the marginalization of such an approach by those who view basic science as the only approach we're celebrating often forms a thick forest of resistance. Thus, in the pilot semesters, my coworker and I volunteered our time to teach the course from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. off the clock. Our feverish collection of evidence to show the merit of the course was first acknowledged when we garnered support at a university studies core course. It was only after this success that we gained the support of our department and were able to teach the course during regular work hours. So the thick gnarled fractal of my capstone course tree branch has budded with new growth that is soft and green and represents each of the 42 students who have now passed through the class. Before this course, I had not thought it was possible to create such a rich learning environment outside of the ski team. If team can enrich the classroom, then curriculum has the power to transform the team. In the summer of 2014, as I biked from Banff to Jasper on Canada's Icefield Parkway, I conceptualized a new course. Fueled by the receding rings of dwindling glaciers, I dreamed of a course in which the ski team would engage in problem-based learning while traveling nationally and internationally for ski competitions. A tiny bud on my philosophical tree, this dream seemed inaccessible until I met a coworker from the Hub School of Environment and Natural Resources. Suddenly, what was a bud grew into a strong shoot and eventually the largest thriving branch, fueled by the lifeblood of my student athletes as it intertwines with the philosophies of Paulo Freire and the instructional design tenets of action learning. In 2015, the UW ski team was invited to be the USA representatives at the World University Games in Strebské Pleso, Slovakia. While competing at the highest level, the skiers also took a course centered on the uncertain future of Nordic skiing due to climate change. Informed by action learning, problem-based learning, and systems theory, that is, the world's greatest problems cannot be solved by a single discipline, this course was the epitome of integrated curriculum. Full course assessment details are published in the Action Research Network of the Americas Journal. Action research is inclusive in its underpinnings, honoring the participants as equal to the researcher in voice and contribution. Thus, after teaching the skiing and climate change course for a second time, we traveled to the Action Research Network of the Americas Conference with 4 student athletes to present on course design, implementation, assessment, and the interdisciplinary pluriversive action research projects completed by the student athletes. It was at this conference that the thick, vibrant branch of action research-based curriculum reached with phototropism to the sun. I learned of the work of Orlando Falls Borda and heard that named for the very first time the practice of excluding other ways of knowing in the classroom. Epistemicide. If epistemicide forms the deepest gashes of exclusion in my most gnarled tree bark, then the pluriversive pedagogies of problem-based action learning form the inclusive environments that support what I have dubbed epistema-thrive. Schooled in the traditions of andragogy, it was when buried in the depths of my adult learner textbook that my humanist, learner-centered philosophies took root. And yet, as an adult learner in the adult education PhD, I never experienced a course that effectively practiced the tenets of andragogy. Thus, in the winter of 2015, when I was asked to become an interim director of the educational development component of UW Science Initiative, I was elated to put into practice my long years of study. I've always been a cautious constructivist. My ability to let go of curriculum in favor of allowing students to build knowledge has been a journey. My charge as an educational developer to train STEM faculty in active learning pedagogies has catalyzed exponential growth. Years of knowledge in assessment has intertwined with new knowledge in scientific teaching, differentiated instruction, growth mindset, cognition, metacognition, multimodal learning, and team-based learning to create a branch the complexity of which I never dreamed was possible. Almost 20 years ago, when I fell in love with teaching students, I never thought it would be possible to have that feeling again. I certainly never thought it would be possible to feel the deep, unending love that I feel for students, for faculty. And yet, at the 2016 Summer Institute, I fell in love with educational development and with educators. On each of the branches of my philosophical tree, students bring beauty and hope as the buds that flower go to seed and disperse. However, now my tree grows in a thick forest surrounded by many other educators' trees. In our shared rhizosphere, we now draw increased strength, and together our branches grow stronger, heal faster, and bud more prolifically.